Thank you everyone for joining today's webinar. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Bill.
Thanks, Michelle. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to HBK's monthly risk advisory webinar series. My name is Bill Heaven. I'm a senior director here at HBK in our risk advisory practice. Today, I'm joined by Director of Risk Compliance and Controls, Tyler Gargano. And I'd like to thank all of you for joining. I think we have a really interesting topic to cover with you today. It's really for companies of any size or shape, and how you can find operational and financial growth internally, which is probably going to be very beneficial with the strange economic times that we're probably entering here. So let's get going. This is our agenda that we're going to cover today. Now, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping or logistical issues for today's webinar. First of all, our presentation this morning is going to be eligible for 1 hour of CPE credit. In order to obtain the CPE credit, you need to stay online for the entire presentation and answer 4 context-sensitive CPE questions that we fire up so that we know that you're paying attention and still on the webinar. Actually, the last question is just a yes/no question, and it's going to be, do you want CPE for today's webinar? If you do, please just answer that question in the affirmative, and we will go ahead and send you out a certificate in the next few days. We've muted all the incoming lines. If you experience problems with anything on the webinar, you can try to communicate with the webinar monitor through the chat window. Additionally, we've been just switched to this platform, and it's got a lot more capabilities. So you can actually just try to refresh your browser if it starts to act up. That relieves a lot of the problems, if there are any, which we typically don't have. We're going to strive to leave at least 5 minutes at the end of the presentation for questions and answers, but if you have questions during the webinar, please just put them in the chat box as we are monitoring that. There's also copies of the presentation and some additional information that you can download out of the Message Control Center. And then we are going to record today's webinar, and we'll be sending it out to everybody that registered in the next few days. So you'll have a copy of the slides as well as a recording of the webinar. As I said, I'm a Senior Director here at HBK CPA. I have been here for just over 4 years. I've got a split role within the firm where I do a lot of our internal IT security and governance, as well as part of the time working with external clients. And as I said earlier, we're lucky to have a guest speaker with us today, Tyler Gargano, and I'm going to switch things over to him right now to allow him to introduce himself. Tyler,
thanks,
go
Bill.
ahead, take it away.
Yep, thanks, Bill. Really appreciate it. Hello, everybody. Thanks again for joining. Really appreciate the collaboration and opportunity to talk with you all today. I think that this topic's interesting, a little bit different from what we might have been used to for those of you that are veterans of this webinar series. But quickly, a little bit about myself. I'm relatively new to HBK, but I feel like I've been intertwined with the company for many, many years just through family ties. I specialize in directing of risks, compliance, controls, as my titling says, but looking really at control processes, looking at operations, how do we get from A to B, and helping companies guide through complex matters. I was named a subject matter expert in 2019 in the inventory and fixed assets processes through a couple different firms that I was working at and with. So that's really where my niche area sits within inventory processing and inventory understanding. I also recently was appointed to be an advisory board member for the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. So a lot of client-facing work is really my where I've been from. I've worked with clients of all shapes and sizes that you can imagine, publicly traded, Fortune 5, 10, 20, 100 companies to small, mom and pop style that work through operations very similarly. Wide range of industries, as you can see in my bio. I've kind of touched on a lot of different areas throughout my career. And I think the best way to answer what I do and what the RCC group here at HBK does is bridge gaps and help clients understand the ins and outs of operations and financials and other strategies, finding what works for you. But enough about me. So today, I'm really, really excited when Bill asked me to jump on this webinar. I listened to a few of them in the past, and I'm happy to get the opportunity here. Like I said earlier, this topic might not be what is used to from this webinar. However, I want this to be very interactive, very discussion-based. That's kind of how I like to operate and get as much feedback from as many people as possible. So please utilize that Q&A function as much as you all can. I would love to kind of have this be question-answer, interactive, conversational. The learning objectives that we're looking for today, and of course, in order to get the CPE, which some of you may have joined just for the CPE, and I fully understand, but looking at our takeaways. So identifying strategies through internal audit methods and internal methodology, apply best in practice corporate operational strategies, identify efficiencies through internal procedures, and then finally recognize areas of opportunity to utilize a subject matter expert in your business or utilize a consulting group really within what your day-to-day operations are. Great. Get started here in the meat of everything. When you probably receive this notification for this webinar via LinkedIn or through the HBK emails, you probably saw operational and financial excellence and asked yourself, what is that? Because I know when Bill and I were discussing topics for this webinar, we bounced a few ideas off of each other, and ultimately this is where we landed. I think that the best way we can shape this conversation is what is operational and financial excellence to start. And really the definition of that would be, it's a perfect world. Everything's great. Operationally, we think all operations at our company are running smoothly. The in and outs, ranging from movement of inventory to corporate strategy to payroll processing, are being executed with no hiccups at all. And then on the financial side, we're looking at, do we understand our numbers that are in the financial statements? Do we understand how we're performing? What's causing financial successes? What's causing financial problems? Which, holistically speaking, wouldn't all that be really, really nice to fully have a full grasp on what is going on at your company and what you're seeing. When looking holistically at your company, it might be a little bit difficult to communicate the current state or status of where you fall in this big picture of this large term excellence. I think of excellence as being perfect. It's the Alabama football. It's the New England Patriots. It's excellence. It's perfection. Unfortunately, it's extremely hard to achieve, and it's not often achieved by many companies. Looking at some of the companies that I've worked at, from the largest of largest sizes, who are extremely profitable and do extremely well, they have issues, and they have issues in their operations, and they have issues in their financials, and bridging those gaps is really what they try to do. There's one thing that I've noticed from my experience in working with these extremely large, well-off companies is that they collaborate and they work from within. They meet and talk internally. They utilize what is the most important factor in their business model. And most of the time it's the people. It's the people of the organization that structure and familiarize themselves with the organization. You place extremely bright people and very vibrant people in these roles internally, and they will close the operational gaps that occur. And they work together to lead teams to better understand what is going on, what's going on with my operations, what's going on with my financials, and utilizing our people the best way that we can. But, realistically, the funny thing about all of this internal function and operational and success from within, it's really not something that's written in a report or discussed. I can't tell you the amount of audit reports or internal special projects that I've worked through, written and issued, and talked with audit committees and high-level management. But this key aspect gets overlooked, I feel like, quite often from what is being reported to management. And it happens, that's just kind of the way it is. There isn't a real test we can do of, do we have the right people in the right places? That's an internal view on your operations. I want to start with kind of what makes up this operational excellence, and then I want to roll into kind of what is financial excellence and kind of what makes that up. And I think this can be transversed into any company size. I mentioned large companies that do extremely well through collaboration. The same thing holds exactly true in companies that I've worked at that are extremely small or mid-size or spin-offs or anything kind of size-wise that works. I think if we can take away one strategy or idea from these next few slides, whether it be operational, financial, or even the other topics that we're going to be discussing today, because we do hit a wide range of topics today, but I think if we can take away one of these items, I think it's really going to significantly help the business that you're in. Okay, just change the slide. So what you see on your screen here is just us going to take an additional step into operational excellence. Obviously the goal of your company is to be clean and clear. I can't tell you the amount of times when I used to work at PwC, the days that I heard that the financial statements are clean and clear. This process is clean and clear. I've heard that comment from audit committees, from board members, from external auditors specifically of everything looks good, everything's clean and clear. And that's really what we're looking at. We have to have a clear understanding of internally, how can we work together to have a clear understanding of what's going on at a transactional and daily basis and what the next 3 to 5 years looks like for our group and how our operations are going to stay ahead of the time, stay with the market and stay, alongside all these movements. The formal definition, which is from Google, is a philosophy that integrates problem solving and leadership to ensure continuous improvement. I've been on many projects where continuous improvement is the goal. It is, what are we doing? How's it happening? Where can we get better? And most of the time, it's going to point to these bubbles that you see on the left-hand side of your screen under the foundation tab there. That's essentially what's going to be the base level or the brickwork of your foundational success. These foundations are really what set the tone for the company. They are our, bread and butter. This is what we do. We know we can do this. We can achieve our goals through a strong foundational group of these 4 kind of key areas. And within those, so we have strategy and looking at that, it's what does our company goals look like? Do we have a clear set of goals? What is our 1, 3, 5 year plans? And really, where do we want this organization to go? You think of a company like a Tesla who has gone through significant change, significant management changes and product differences. Elon Musk mentions that those were all a part of the 1, 3, 5 year plan. They have a clear mindset of where they want this company to go. And all that comes from your internal strategies, your internal people that have this vision and this goal of what they want to see. Looking at structure in our next bubble, it's organizational structure. I mentioned this earlier. Are the people in our organization set up to succeed? And do we have the right people in our organization in the right job? Do we have them performing the right strategy tasks that we want that's ultimately going to put us into the success area in our mind of where we want to be as a leadership role in our company? Organization structure is extremely important. I spend a lot of time on my audits looking at org charts, discussing org charts, discussing reporting streamlines, how we can better, talking internally on this process feeds to this person and how we can discuss those strategies. Next bucket would be process and system. So this is a very niche area. I feel like, technology, especially in the business world, has gone through so many changes from you think about where we were to where we're at. My father-in-law, he runs a very successful real estate company, and he tells me about the days where they had the accounting books spread throughout a long table and they're handwriting and talking internally versus where we're at now, where everything's on the computer, everything's automated, everything's through a system, whether it be SAP, QuickBooks, or kind of whatever intertwined system that you use. Having the right system and understanding that business and operations and reporting strategies are going to change, and it's always going to change. We're in a very ever-changing landscape of what is, what does our accounting structure look like? What does, how do our communications within our systems work? What is going on? Do we have the best strategies in place for our IT? We'll touch on this a little bit later, but extremely crucial to the business, especially in today's world. And finally, the last piece of the foundational success would be very plain and simple. What are we operating, and how do our customers respond? When looking at an operational strategy and looking at kind of what these products that we have are, whether it be a solid base steel manufacturing, whether it be, we're a restaurant retail business where we're looking to grow brand, grow outward, it's streamline activities. What is our products? What is our service? And how do we offer them correctly? I think the definition of excellence and looking at these foundational strategies is probably different for any and all companies. I think no one company is going to have the same strategy. No one company is going to have the same kind of foundational exercises, and that's important. I think that's what sets a lot of difference between kind of what you do and what your competition does and what your other people do. Looking at the enablers, so when I have my foundations, I bounce off to the enablers. So what is making up these pieces? So on the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see that performance management. I see a lot of success through KPI management. How are we measuring our people? How are we measuring our strategy? What is a goal for every employee? I used to work at a company and we were extremely tightly measured on our KPIs and our performance. And in an internal audit function, it's, are we finding audit observations? Are we utilizing strategy that we want to see? Looking at our continuous improvement strategies as well. What are we doing to get better? What are we doing to stay ahead? And what are we doing to work collaboratively with each other? And ultimately that's what makes up the operational excellence piece of the business, as it is utilizing a strategy that you can use for your operations to succeed. And kind of, I like to point to these in a lot of the meetings that I attend or I work with where people want to talk about operations. And I always will kind of fall back on, these are our foundational strategies. What are we doing to make sure we're getting these goals and achieving the highest successes at our company? Looks like we have a CPE question.
Yeah, let's Michelle, can you load our first question for us?
Thanks, Michelle.
Looks like most people have responded, Tyler. So if you're ready, you can just keep going on your next slide.
Awesome. Thanks, Bill. Thanks everybody for getting that CPE taken care of. Looking at, and I'm sure you're going to find extreme value in those questions that were made up, but looking into our financial excellence now. Just spoke on operations. So what's financial excellence? What does it look like? I like to look at financial excellence in kind of two big buckets. It's mindset versus tactical. A mindset would be a lot more focused on internal goals, internal, regard of where I want to be and what I want my company to be at. Versus tactical is the stuff that we have to do. I'm going to start on the right side, looking at financial reporting. It's, do we understand how we are performing? Is typically the question that I'll ask. I ask a lot of audit committees that I work with of that is, do we understand kind of what's going on in our company? Our financials should tell a story of what the company's doing. The goal of financial reporting holistically is learn from the past to improve on the future. I see a lot of companies struggle with, month-end, year-end close. I think closing the books is extremely hard. I've worked with many clients who essentially shut down for, that last week of the month or year-end's always this mad rush to the finish line. And I always get a little giggle out of it just because I think if we have the right strategy, if we have the right financial reporting strategy, if we have the right control layout, we should be able to holistically close the books fairly easily. Granted, I know there are additional steps, but it shouldn't be this big rush, or the company shouldn't necessarily shut down based on where we're at in the year. The next bucket would be financial modeling, which would be, how does your business perform under specific scenarios? What happens if, I like to, kind of role play with business leaders of like, what happens if we do have a spike in inventory? Where are we going to store everything? What happens if we have a decline in production? What are we going to do with our people? I like to phrase a lot of those questions just to get the ball rolling on what does the financial impact going to be? What's what's going to happen in these different scenarios? I know we're just getting out of, COVID-19 and everything like that. And we're, we've rebounded and we're working towards where we used to be. Fingers crossed with the markets and everything. But, I think this was a different scenario. This was something that I don't think a lot of people were ready for. A lot of people were used to. And how did your company perform? I like to use similar, like those what if scenarios. And that's really what I like to fall back on and discuss with my clients. The third tactical item would be financial analysis, or an easier word is what's causing the financial problems. Visual representation of data is the new trend. I love it. I think it's absolutely fascinating how people can show data in visual and depict it. I think it could just be my brain, but I always tend to fall back on I'd rather see a visual than look at line items. And I think that could be why I transitioned out of external audit into internal audit. But I think a lot of this kind of falls back to what actionable items can we take away to grow the business? What does these financial problems and what does, the solution look like? And I think a visual representation bridges that gap. Looking into the mindset side, so looking at the darker blue bubbles on your screen, financial reporting is, I think that could also be in a tactical, financial acumen is where we're at. And looking at that mindset of, easier said, do we understand our numbers? Do we understand what's going into these numbers on these financial statements? Can we communicate them in a meaningful way to understand the true story of what is taking place and what is, how we're interacting with what's on our balance sheet, what's in our income statement. The next one would be financial goals and objectives. Do our financial goals align with our business objectives, and do our company results speak to those goals that we're trying to obtain? A few of the interactions I've had with kind of smaller size companies, we get a lot of unclear of, I don't know what my business is going to look like 5, 10, 20 years from now. What can I do to stay ahead? I want my business to succeed. How can I get there? And there's a million answers to respond to that with, but I think holistically understanding that our financials need to be in alignment with our operations and our operations need to be in alignment with our goals will kind of all feed everything back together to understand how we can be successful. And finally, looking at financial planning is in conjunction with those goals and objectives. Is this plan doable? I've seen a lot of shot in the dark ideas and a lot of shot in the dark communications of, I want my company to do X. However, I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if I have the people in the right position to succeed and to do this. Understanding that it might not be right now. It could be 3, 5, 10 years from now where we get to that doable stage in our business. But understanding that in the big scheme of things, is this process doable? And are we capable of doing it is a question I like to ask a lot of the times. I have these little takeaway slides here and really just kind of summarize what we're saying. It's, a couple things that I would like you to take away with is ask the question to the organization of whether you are wherever you fall in the organizational chart of where are we at, where are we going? Once we kind of get intertwined with a business here at HBK, I like to phrase that question to executives of where's the company at? Where do we want it to be, and how are we going to get there, and where are we going to go? Where are we at today, and do these goals align to tomorrow? It is really the thought process that should be under leadership's head of continuing pressing forward and continuing that progress forward. Next item would be operational jealousy is real. I think that I see this all the time, especially amongst larger companies where they have SAP implemented, and as soon as they scan an item that's in their warehouse, it's automatically going into their system. And why can't my company do that? Why can't we do that? I think the biggest thing there is competition's not going anywhere. Having that discussion with what are we doing to be the best is crucial at any organization. Utilizing these people and who typically are in the middle twinings of the work that's being completed is who I like to go to most. I think of managers that are on an inventory floor, or people who are in those day-to-day roles that are impacted directly by a system change, directly impacted by an operational strategy change, or a control implementation where they now have to do an extra step. What is the impact there, and kind of how does it look? And I think having a discussion of understanding why, why are we doing these changes? Why are we having this take place within the company? And through the rest of this webinar, I'm going to focus this discussion on strategies, stuff that I've seen work, successes we've talked about, successes that I've seen, or kind of new solutions to clarify, what does the business look like? How can we have these conversations and within your organization? Next would be around internal methodology. And really what I want to look at is strategies. What is the best view on procedures within your business? How do we look at what we are doing? There's three main goals to methodology maintenance, or really questions. It's, what is your process methodology? How can methodology be updated? And then what is the benefit of updating internal methodology? Looking at process methodology, it's a simple explanation of what are we doing, how are we doing it, and who do we have doing it. Formally, we're looking at activity that adds value to improve organizations' operations. I think step one in evaluation is defining the process methodology. I think a lot of people understand, what do we do for X process is the question. If you look back at the slide or even back at the agenda and ask yourself, I really don't know. I don't know what methodologies we have installed. I don't know what processes we are relying on. We've kind of just always done it this way. This is a great place to start, understanding how the methodology needs to be impacted and how the methodology needs to be discussed internally. On the other hand, say that you have this established methodology. We have a clear understanding of what the goals of the company are, what our methods are, and how we get to them. Look to address what this company structure looks like would be kind of my response. Does having an extremely complex methodology make sense? Does this make sense? I've worked on a few clients who they have just hammered methodology. They've hammered processes. They've hammered the way that this is the way this should be done. And in times it's great, but also in other times it could get confusing. It could get a little bit burdensome of, what it needs to look like. And I've seen on the other end of, companies keep it completely simple, and companies have these discussions of, this is how we do X, Y, Z. And this is why we do it. All levels to comprehend these guidelines is extremely crucial, from CFO all the way down to, sorry, my light just turned off in my office. Sorry about that. But, as a leader in your company, the best place to start is having that discussion with management and to understand what's working and what's not working. Finally, looking at what's the benefit of updating this internal methodology? Communication. It creates that gap. It creates that clear understanding of what is going on and kind of how we do things. Updating, I like to start with, formal documentation updating, looking at process flow charts is really where I like to, kind of house all my, how do we get from A to B? And we'll roll right into, CPE question.
Okay, looks like we're ready for our second CPE question. Okay, it looks like or a fair amount of people have responded. So whenever you're ready, Tyler, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Bill. Appreciate it. Like I mentioned, I really like to focus on process flowcharts. I think these are a great visual representation of what we can do. I think that the way that the audit kind of legislator, you could say, has shaped what we can do within these flowcharts to communicate processes, to communicate system changes, to communicate decision-making points, and also utilize, if you see the small triangles on your screen, where these controls are taking place. We have these giant book of controls, whether you have to be SOX compliant as a publicly traded company, or if you're a private company that has a great book of controls and you kind of operate based on a control function, It eases the question around how do we do X. This visual representation really shows a clear picture of what the organization looks like. I've seen so many benefits come from this. It helps leadership answer this question of what's going on in this case that you see on your screen, my procure to pay process. How are we getting these payments out to these vendors? What systems are being used? Who's being notified? It lets everybody from the ground floor all the way up to executive management clearly view and see this is what happens at this stage. This is who is doing what. If you see on the left-hand side of your screen, you'll see the buyer, you see the receiving, you see the AP, and that's the ownership of that piece. I'm a heavy advocate on priority areas and taking that holistic approach of what makes sense for your business. A lot of times we get a lot of questions around process flowcharts to create them for clients, to work with them with clients. And it's probably one of my favorite tasks to do because you really get to understand your business. You get to have the interviews with leadership. You get to have the interviews with management, and you get to understand, oh, this is what's happening at this stage of your business. And we can also implement controls where we can have these little tests and checkpoints across the whole year. I really enjoy, I think leadership gets a great project and a great, deliverable from these process flowcharts. And I think the most important piece is when you finish a lot of these, you're able to report them back out. You're able to communicate them to the businesses, to the business owners, to the various business units if you have a large structured business, or even to your local employees. I like to focus on utilization of subject matter experts for some of these areas. If you have an extremely complex inventory makeup, if you have areas within your business that are extremely complex, utilizing subject matter experts who have that understanding of a process. SMEs bring a level of expertise within these specific subject areas that guide the conversations to help get a clear picture within your organization and operational, excellence structure of how to be where you want to be and how to show where you're at right now. I think that's a lot of the times what these flowcharts do for leadership is show this is where we're at, and oh my God, I didn't think we were doing it this way. I thought we had this person do X or Y. A lot of times we'll see a lot of interaction with third-party retailers where, say you're a restaurant or a retail group who's client-facing and you do a lot of business with third parties. You're going to have a lot of interactions with third-party people and parties. I think this flowcharting is extremely crucial to that type of environment as well, where you can see who's signing off at a specific stage, who's getting throughway match details, and who's better understanding kind of what are my processes doing when I'm interacting with somebody outside of my organization. Yes, I'm a big advocate on flowcharts. I think that there's great value within there.
Tyler, this seems like it would be, because we have different sized companies on today, but it seems like, one of the things that I always ask people, from my cybersecurity perspective is what keeps you up at night. And in this case, so you have a lot of smaller businesses which obviously have controls in place, but they may not really know what they are. It would seem like, what's your experience with doing this type of work and actually allowing the business owner to, rest easier at night because it points out what controls they really have or what they don't have and where they need controls? Is that fair?
Bill, that's exactly, that's completely fair. And honestly, that's probably my favorite interactions with companies is, hey, I have this big book of controls and I think we're doing them all, but I really don't know where they make sense to be. Or, hey, I have these 300 controls. Is this too many? I think that's a lot of the conversation. And this is where you can get that visual representation of this is where this control makes sense and how we plot it in the big scheme of things. I think those are my favorite types of clients to do these for because you're really starting at the ground level of the control framework of the organizations and the operations. And you get to see the exact instance of where that control takes place. And that makes it easier on the back end to test it. If we're following suits, and if we're looking at this picture, you see C1, you see C3, you see C2, they should follow in chronological order of what they're taking place. It's easy to test on the back end. It's easy to understand where your controls should be implemented and where you should be looking at. Very similar, like you said, Bill, if there's a gap, it's very evident. It's very evident of, we have, if you look on the the screen, you see we have in our buyer side, we have, connect to the purchase order, convert the PR into the purchase order. So we have multiple controls going on there where we're getting our invoice, we're moving it over to the rec, we're moving it over to the purchase order, we're getting various sign-offs. There's 3-4 controls taking place right there alone. And you can see that represented by those triangles in the example that's noted on the screen. But yeah, it's exactly in alignment. Thank you.
Good, thanks.
Another CPE question for you all.
Another CPE.
Mm-hmm.
If you're ready, Tyler, go on.
Yep. Thank you, Bill. Another strategy that I like to do and I like to communicate with my clients is risk assessments, evaluation to creation. The RCC group here at HBK, I think the different avenues we've taken with risk assessments, we have a very polished product. I think that we understand kind of how to evaluate risk and where to find risk within the organization and how to communicate it back out. There's many different risk assessment strategies that I've seen, whether they be high, medium, low, 1, 2, 3, kind of where's the risk sitting within the organization. I think four primary factors is my biggest takeaway of what makes into these risk assessments. Would be materiality of amounts. How are we evaluating risk of our large dollar transactions, or our high value volume of transactions? What's the impact on the back end of these extremely high dollar value transactions, and kind of what does this do to the landscape? Noting risk within that is kind of inherent in having those discussions on how are we going to test this? Should we do a formalized audit on these processes and controls and procedures? Is really the kind of the questions that streamline from these materiality of amounts. And everybody's materiality and thresholds are all different, of course, but what makes sense for your company? How much risk are you willing to take or not take? The next item would be kind of the complexity of the process. There's many areas in business that are extremely highly technical, especially with data handoffs or communication handoffs or X person's talking to Y person, kind of what's the documentation trail. Complexity of the process is really where we find a lot of value in our internal audits, where it might not be the materiality that we're seeing in our audits, but we're seeing kind of areas within the operational or financial processes of your business that are hard. They're difficult. To be completely black and white. There's areas in our business that are just difficult, and somebody's been doing it for a numerous amount of years, and they retired. Did our new hire pick it up? Did our senior associate pick up where we were? History of adjustments. In the past, did you have an error on your financial statements? In the past, did you have multiple external audit findings or internal operational findings or issues that you've seen? I think that's a very hot topic for audits. They'll probably get flagged pretty much every year if there's historical findings. I think the final piece is kind of interesting that I wrote in here. It's propensity to change. Are our business process, financial process, IT process, controls, are they ready to change? Are they able to change? What's our accounting strategies look like to go through this change? And is the company ready? I think is a big question to ask. It could get flagged on your risk assessment of an extremely high area of, I think there's a major control gap here, or I think there's a control gap that might not be relevant right now, but in 3, 5, 10 years, it could be, just with the changing of business models and everything like that. I think understanding what the change looks like, whether it be on your operations or in your controls, I think is an extremely crucial conversation. Those are the 4 primary factors that kind of go into the risk assessment in a big picture. We push those across to the other side, and you'll see that high, medium, low. And we like to rank them, like I've been mentioning, of where's the low risk, where's the medium level, and kind of where's this high risk sit, and kind of what what's our impact and what is our deliverable? I think at the end of the day, I think all of us can agree that when we're doing risk assessments, we like to kind of see and set the tone for the year of what everything looks like, our financial models and operational procedures. What does this all look like? I think having that, low, medium, high rating paints a clear picture. I like to just use red, yellow, green to really see, because it pops that high risk areas and you understand kind of where the risk appetite within the company is. I'm a big advocate on risk assessments. I think risk assessments should be completed every single year for every single company, utilizing their financial strategies, utilizing their financial statements to get a better understanding of what story their numbers are telling, which then feed into your operations, which you're going to get a clear picture once you identify an area in your business based on your financial models of, hey, we need to look here, or hey, we need to do some additional testing here. Big advocate. I think risk assessments paint those pictures every single time that I've been worked on risk assessment. Methodology maintenance, what is the benefit of updating this methodology? I think it's just crucial to stay up with time. I think keeping systems, information, controls, processes updated not only help, with what you're going on with your external audits and your financial reporting strategies, but it keeps procedures fresh and in act. I think it keeps kind of what you're doing within your internal group fresh, and they understand kind of what needs to be done and why. I've had numerous conversations with control owners, typically those who work on like annual controls or controls that fall out of scope for a couple of years, and then for whatever reason they pop back in scope. They don't really understand why they're doing the control. Why do we have to test this control? Why do we have to execute this control? It's been out of scope for 3 years, and we recently acquired a company that just popped into the threshold to make it relevant again. I think having that base understanding the importance of the controls and why they're being executed creates that all-in approach within the organization to understand where we're at. Topic 2, takeaways. I think the biggest thing is, how can I communicate and implement these strategies into my company and businesses and our best practices? I think utilize strategies that work for you is kind of what I would lead with, is what makes sense. There's no one fold answer to every single issue. There's multiple strategies, there's multiple approaches that we can take on your internal side as well as your consulting side of what does this look like in the big picture, and how can my company do it? Like I said earlier, I'm a big advocate on flowcharts. I'm a big advocate on yearly risk assessments to understand, what strategy to understand what's going on in our financials, what's our operations look like, and kind of how can we benefit from identifying these strategies. And it's not a one full solution, like I said earlier. There's many other different approaches that you can take to this, whether they be detailed narratives or we have our formalized book of audits. That's kind of what we like to look for, but ultimately accomplish the same goal of answering these questions of how can I communicate these back out? What does management kind of look for when we're talking through them? I want to quickly touch on industry trends, and I think kind of operational and financial excellence fall into this bucket as well of being reactive or retroactive or proactive in looking at industry trends. I think kind of what successes are within these trends and kind of what we're seeing from a financial standpoint and operational standpoint. Personally, I like to really speak to industry trends. I like to be up in the know of what's going on in the internal audit world, in the operational world, and kind of what everything looks like. I think presented to clients, I like to have the discussion of, similar to baseball, if you understood or knew what pitch is coming, you're probably going to have a better chance to hit the ball. If you knew what changes are going to come in the long-term picture of your company, you're going to be able to prepare. 2 items stick out financially in my mind that I want to discuss, which would be forecasting and then kind of your internal control modeling, which can also be bucketed into our operational standpoint. But looking at forecasting, I think this was an interesting topic. I did a lot of research prior to this webinar of, what's going on with forecasting, just because we've been through the last 3-4 years of extreme change, extreme uncertainty of what my company's going to look like. And honestly, forecasting is hard. It's using strategies that you've implemented to better understand kind of what can we be, where can we be at. Looking at what the economic landscapes looked like over the last couple of years, it's been two-folded. It's where we see a lot of companies that are trying to get back to that pre-outbreak of COVID operations that shut down a lot of businesses, shut down a lot of operations, and those that also benefit from the outbreak. I worked with a lot of biopharma companies who did extremely well during COVID, and understood that probably service line matters. And very similar, I've worked with companies who also struggled during COVID, that their operations kind of had to take a standstill and what everything looked like. I've seen the biggest question we have to ask is what's your business look like right now? What does the landscape look like? Have you had to have employee changes, and have you had to have operational changes because of those employee movements? Looking at like a specific item that comes to my mind would be like a retail restaurant type business, who's consistently working with third parties, who's consistently importing and moving goods, whether it be to Canada or any other country. What does your landscape look like there with the cross border, and customs, and kind of what conversations and what management strategies were implemented there? I think forecasting sets the tone of what that looks like. I think keeping a clear eye on where our company is at and kind of what we need to look like, whether it be pre-outbreak, whether it be in the world we're in now. I think having those discussions with management are extremely crucial. Internal controls, I've kind of talked through in detail of this. I think a lot of the point I want to touch on here is controls changed significantly over the last couple of years, and with the remote work that is a lot of companies take shift into now, it changed significantly the amount of controls and what your controls look like. Where are these handoffs taking place if everything's remote? Does DocuSign need a SOC 1 or SOC 2 report? I think, understanding what IT strategies we're using and everything like that. I think controls change, and I think being aware and understand that my business and my operations might not be what they were 2, 3, 4 years ago. And we might not have even caught it, just because we had to keep the operations going and we had to keep the controls processing and completed. From an operational standpoint, I think there's 4 real big buckets that I look at. Automation. Everything's trending to automation. Everybody's looking for RPA. Everybody's looking for strategies where they can look at how we can make the system act as the system. Third parties, I think we've utilized third parties internally, and I think it's only helped strategy. Understanding the knowledge and having to catch everybody up to speed when you're utilizing a third party is always cause business curve. But understanding, where does third party risk sit? Where does this, how do we manage the third party interactions? At the IIA conference a couple weeks ago, ESG, environmental, social, and government, was a huge topic. It was pretty much 95% of the topics during the conference. And it's a trend that's just not going anywhere with how, what the impacts on the environment are, what the impacts within your social landscape and your social networking, and kind of your relationship with government. Are we in line with what's going on? Or do we understand kind of our impact on the environment is an extremely crucial area. I've seen a lot of internal audits do ESG reviews where we're looking at the impact on society. We're looking at the impact on the environment. What is our output of negative emissions and everything like that? And supply chain, I think everybody's been heard about supply chain and supply chain issues. It created logistical challenges that are, increased costs, extending to the recovery, which we're in now. What happened with our supply chain? Do we review our inventory levels adequately? Do we keep key objectives and key goods in a area that they should have been? Do we have material realization of this is what our business needs, and this is kind of how we need to manage our supply chain? A lot of audit work around there as well of what makes sense to keep the movement of goods, the movement of our inventory. These next couple of slides, I really wanted to focus on kind of what's a strategy. What's a strategy for management? I put some questions in here that I ask our clients all the time. What are we doing to communicate the strategy, and are we understanding where our people are in the process? So just to highlight a few of the bullet points you see on your screen, what training does our organization provide? And are we being held accountable for training, and how do we monitor, identify employees who are looking at fatigue, and what preventive measures? This all feeds into what we talked about earlier around the operational excellence piece of if our people are not there or our people are not happy, we're not going to get to our financial and operational goals. I think people are crucial to this piece. And then, I think a couple other items within that alignment is burnout. I think with this remote work, a lot of people are seeing employee turnovers. We had the Great Resignation. I saw the EYs and the PwCs and Deloitte's mention this Great Resignation, where a lot of employees were turning over and everything like that. Wholeheartedly, I think it was understanding what's this landscape look like. Especially in the accounting field and financial field, it's a lot of stuff can be done remotely now. A lot of stuff can be communicated differently. But ultimately, are we taking care of our people? I think is the biggest question we need to ask. And what indicators within risk did this trigger, and what does this look like? Next kind of industry trend takeaway I just want to touch on is the nature of business changes. It changes honestly hourly, if not daily, weekly, monthly. Sometimes change is good, sometimes change is not good. Understanding kind of what is crucial for your success. Are we performing our risk assessments? Do we understand where the risk lies within our company? Do we understand, what concerns our business leaders and our CFOs and our CEOs are having, with what's going on with our day-to-day operations? Next, I just want to touch really quickly on company culture, and I started to get into the people aspect of this and kind of how it all kind of falls into this operational excellence piece of people are our operations, and our operations feed from our people. Changes in the organization happen. These conversations help guide everybody understand what are we doing with X process? How do we have people utilized in the right position? This company culture is such a hot topic. It could probably be its own webinar. So Bill, I think I got us another topic for a webinar, but, being able to have the conversations that create a collaborative atmosphere, it just helps solve the problems. It helps understand kind of where we can speak up and what we can do. And finally, just kind of in wrap up, HBK can help. In your deliverables at the conclusion of this, you'll see a couple pages around my group, around the risk compliance and controls group, and what we can do for you. We help you achieve the goals of your company. We look at organizational structures, navigating through an extremely complex and ever-changing business world of where you want to be. We help you reach these operational and financial excellence goals. Please reach out, once you read through and go through that document. I think it really paints a picture of what our firm is now offering, and specifically my group, and kind of how we navigate through this ever-changing world. But I saw a quote. I'm going to wrap up here in a second, but it's if you want to go fast, you'll go alone. If you want to go far, you'll go together. And I think working in conjunction internally feeds that kind of end goal of operational excellence, financial excellence, kind of how we wrap it all up into one big picture. And then finally, the last CPE question, which is probably the hardest question of the webinar.
Hopefully it's not, but it probably is. All right, let's go ahead. And then, so I think we've got just a few minutes left where we can do some questions. And as you can see on the screen, if you do have any, this is a very interesting topic that Tyler presented to us. So if you do have any questions, there's the contact information, Tyler's information. If you have any questions for me, I'd be surprised, but I can route them over to Tyler. And that's, so those are, Michelle, do we have any questions that came in while we were doing the webinar?
Yes, the first question that came in is, what is the biggest challenge in adopting changes within my organization, and how can HBK help me close the gaps where this has already happened?
Sounds like that one's good for you, Tyler.
Yeah, I think realistically looking, I think it starts with a conversation. I think it starts with having a conversation internally of what's our strategy makeup? What does this look like? And then kind of streamlining that across of where can we potentially involve people that have done this before. I think having that ease of, knowing that somebody's been through organizational strategy and structures, I think that's a big piece. And I think that's where HBK can come into play. And I think that's where my group can really assist in, and is we've seen this in various different magnitudes and kind of understanding what's going on. But it all starts with the conversation. I think it all starts internally discussing what makes sense. How do we want to report this out, and how do we want to discuss this to maybe see or not see where our risk lies.
Okay, great. Are there any other questions? No, it looks like we have, just a couple minutes left. So probably do one more question and then we can wrap it up.
Yes, the next question that came in was, how does my company stay ahead of the curve that was mentioned during this webinar?
Yeah, no, great question. I think the biggest couple pieces within that would be, one, having discussion with your consultants, with your consulting group, whether it be, externally or even if you have them in-house to come indoors. I think that would be a step one. I think, like I mentioned, I like to stay ahead of what's going on within the businesses and what's going on with companies and strategies and execution. And I think also understanding what does leadership want? What does leadership, do we want to go into a fully automated world of working? And do we want to better utilize our people in different ways and strategies? I think utilizing leadership and as well as your external consulting groups will help you bridge that gap.
So I think that was really appreciate you joining us today, Tyler. I think that was a very worthwhile webinar, and hopefully the audience found that beneficial. And again, if you have any questions after the fact, please feel free to reach out to us. As I stated earlier, we're going to be sending a copy of the slide deck and the recording so that any of your colleagues that may have missed it, you could forward that on to them. We'll be sending out a save the date soon for our next webinar, which will be July 27th. So if you want to join us then, that one also will be eligible for CPE. So again, Tyler, thanks a lot for putting this presentation together. I thought it was very well done, and I'm sure the audience got a lot of benefit out of it. And thanks again. And I'd like to wish everybody a great afternoon, and I'll give you a couple minutes back of your day, and then get to lunch a little early. So thanks again, Tyler, and everyone have a great afternoon, and come back and see us on the 27th of July. Thanks.
Thank you.